What's up, guys? It is your boy SimoneFan101, and today we are on part 6 of Star Wars Mania, and today we are at the conclusion of the prequel trilogy, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. This movie was released in 2005. George Lucas once again takes full reign of the controls. He is both director, screenwriter, and storyman of the entire movie. Rick McCallum, of course, is once again producing this movie like he did with episodes 1 and 2. And this movie, believe it or not, was actually the first movie I ever saw in theaters. Well, not the first movie. That one would have to be probably Lord of the Rings Return of the King. Another conclusion of a trilogy, which is just hilarious. But, yeah. So Star Wars Episode 3 was the first Star Wars movie, I should say, to have been released in theaters. That's the first one I've ever seen in theaters. So this movie does have a little bit of a special place in my heart. That being said, I tried my best to be as critical of this movie as I can, and I have the same thoughts that I have pretty much ever since when I first saw it. I love this movie. Gonna say that right now. I love this movie. I thought this was a more than worthy entry into the Star Wars franchise. I'll get to why in a bit. So, what's the story? 3 years after the events of Episode 2 and basically the start of the Clone Wars, we're taking place over a battle of Coruscant. How the hell do we get here? Well, if you watched the original Star Wars Clone Wars TV show made by Genndy Tartakovsky, this was the completely cartoon animated Star Wars TV show. You'll know that and of course they explain in the opening scroll, but General Grievous, which is basically a droid general who was once human, I believe. Yeah, he was once human, now has a robotic body. The droid General Grievous, who has been trained by Count Dooku himself to be a Jedi killer, invaded Coruscant to kidnap Chancellor Palpatine. And of course the movie starts out with this giant battle over the planet. A bunch of, separatist ships and clone ships, all of them just destroying the shit out of each other. Hell, the movie starts off with a very good granted, it's not like authentic like, Halloween, but a very good tracking shot of the beginning of the battle, which follows two Jedi starfighter pilots, Anakin and Obi-Wan. And of course their mission is to rescue the Chancellor from Grievous's ship. They go to the ship, they fight Count Dooku in the room where Chancellor Palpatine's at. Obi-Wan is knocked out, but Anakin kills Dooku at the behest of Chancellor Palpatine in a very sinister voice that I will explain in a bit. After they escape that room, they're eventually captured by General Grievous, and the Jedi escape from that little predicament. And right as they corner the general, he escapes, and because he's a droid general, he can breathe in space. They're able to land the ship, which is at one point has been torn in half, safely on Coruscant, and everyone makes it out okay. So, this movie starts out pretty friggin' strong. How does it turn out afterward? Well, Anakin finds out when he gets home from Padme that Padme is pregnant. Of course, as we know, Jedi aren't allowed to be married, and by extension are allowed to have, kids. So hearing this is not exactly the happiest thing at first for Anakin, as Anakin clearly is worried, but he eventually gets over it and says, this is a good thing. I'm gonna be a dad. Of course, things don't, stay mellow for long, as it's become soon apparent that the Jedi Council do not trust Chancellor Palpatine at all, and they want Anakin. to find out exactly what the Chancellor is doing. Especially with Chancellor doing certain things like being awarded more emergency powers. It's one of the few things I didn't really explain that well in my review of episode 2, was that in order for the war to be okay, and, for the war, for an actual army to be created, the Senate had to give up emergency powers to the Chancellor, giving him basically more powers of immediate authority. Similar to, say, a king or an emperor, or similar, but, still giving a little bit of power to the Senate. Being awarded more emergency powers, and, actually basically putting Anakin Skywalker on the Jedi Council, have the Jedi all worried. And now it's Anakin's job to find out exactly what he's doing behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan, during this whole thing, Obi-Wan is sent on a mission to find and kill General Grievous in the Utapau system. And, eventually, of course, a battle ensues, and Obi-Wan, eventually, after a long, protracted battle, he kills General Grievous. Meanwhile, Anakin is slowly being seduced to the dark side by Chancellor Palpatine, who turns out to be Darth Sidious. He turns out to be the mastermind behind pretty much the entirety of the prequel and sequel trilogy, the prequel and original trilogy, as I should say. Oh, and by the way, many characters assume their previous roles. Natalie Portman is Padme. Efrain Goss as Yoda. Hayden Christensen returns as Anakin. Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine / Darth Sidious. Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu. And what's curious about Mace Windu is that out of all the Jedi, Mace Windu is the one most distrusting of Anakin. He does not trust Anakin at all, because he's very wary of him. Matthew Wood plays General Grievous. Christopher Lee, of course, returns as Christopher Lee, as Count Dooku. But pretty much all the previously casted members, they return for this movie, so nothing really new there. So, continuing, as the plot moves along, and when Anakin finds out that he is indeed Darth Sidious, as Sidious straight up told him, he goes to Mace Windu, who takes 3 other Jedi with him to confront and arrest Sidious. Sidious kills the other 3 Jedi, but is eventually defeated by Mace Windu. But before Mace Windu could do anything about it, Anakin arrives, even though he was told specifically not to, due to his relationship with the Chancellor Palpatine. It was said straight up that the Chancellor had befriended Anakin pretty much since he arrived on Coruscant when he was a boy. So, of course, they have a close relation, or a close friendship. And as Mace Windu is about to use the killing blow, keep in mind, earlier in the movie, Palpatine, Sidious tells Anakin that there is a way to save his wife Padme. Well, first he tells him through a power that his master, Darth Plagueis, used to have. Of course, Sidious killed Plagueis in his sleep. And if you read if you know anything about the expanded universe of Star Wars, you'll know that this actually all took place during the events of Episode 1, which is, kind of intriguing. And later, he basically, not only does he reveal himself, he also reveals that, yeah, I know you're married to Padme, and I know you're about to have a child. So, yes, you have all these factors coming together, and the slow manipulation of Anakin, and eventually Anakin, in a desperate attempt to save Darth Sidious from death, cuts off Mace Windu's hand, and Sidious, who by this point has been completely scarred by his own Sith lightning being deflected back at him, uses Sith lightning once again and kills Mace Windu. Afterward, well, we all know the scene. Order 66 takes place. Anakin takes a bunch of clones to the Jedi Temple to kill all the Jedi, including the younglings, while Order 66 is happening throughout the galaxy, in which they're all killing the Jedi generals and captains and whatnot, including an attempted assassination on Obi-Wan and Master Yoda, both of whom survive. Master Yoda, by the way, is on Kashyyyk and is fighting alongside the Wookiees, just in case you're wondering. So after all this happens, Obi-Wan and Yoda return to Coruscant thanks to Bail Organa, played by Jimmy Smits in this movie, and they are able to find out what's going on. They attack the Jedi Temple to try to light a homing beacon, so that way no other Jedi would go back and, of course, be trapped and killed. And during this attempt, two things happen. A, Palpatine reforms the Republic into the Galactic Empire that, of course, we know in the original trilogy, and Yoda and Obi-Wan find out that Anakin was the one that indeed betrayed the Jedi and killed many of the Jedi at the temple, and of course they know his new name, Darth Vader. And of course they come up with a plan. Obi-Wan is to find Anakin and basically kill him, and Yoda is to attack the Emperor and to kill him. Meanwhile, during all this, Padme is just, a wreck. And honestly, compared to the first two movies, she doesn't do all that much, although, to be fair, there were deleted scenes with her and the other senators trying to figure out what to do with the Chancellor and getting more emergency powers. If you watch the deleted scenes, you start seeing shades of the Galactic Rebellion against what then is the Republic and now is the Empire. Of course, these are deleted scenes and of course are in fact non-canon. As for Padme herself, though, in the movie that we know, she of course gets more pregnant. She's worried about Anakin, and she's confronted by Obi-Wan saying, "Hey, where's Anakin?" Anakin went to Mustafar to kill the Separatist leaders and succeeds, including killing Poggle the Lesser. He was the Geonosian from the second movie who speaks Dooku, as well as Viceroy Gunray, who, if you watch the movies, his role is slowly diminished by the time Episode 3 comes, going from a major villain in the first movie to basically a side note in this one. In this, and of course, Padme after Obi-Wan finds out that Anakin is the father through, of course, deductive reasoning. She goes to Anakin to confront him about what Obi-Wan told her about betraying the Jedi. Of course, Obi-Wan sneaks aboard her ship. Anakin thinks Obi-Wan is there to kill him, and he force chokes Padme, and after letting her go, they of course have their long and very much anticipated fight that pretty much all of us have been looking forward to since the announcement of the prequel trilogies. Trilogy. Meanwhile, Yoda is going to confront Darth Sidious, who by this time is already the Emperor, and they have a really good fight scene, not just including sword fighting, but also including the use of their force powers. Yoda, however, is basically defeated, or basically comes to a draw with Sidious, and he has to escape, and eventually says, "I must go into exile." Meanwhile, on Mustafar, the fight is escalated between Anakin and Obi-Wan, to the point where now they're basically over a giant pool of river of lava on some platforms. Obi-Wan gets the upper hand, and of course we all know what happens. He jumps up on the rocks. Anakin gets overconfident with his powers. Obi-Wan cuts off both his legs and his left arm, which was his only flesh and blood arm left, and leaves along with Padme, 3PO, and R2-D2. Of course, Padme gives birth to both Luke and Leia. She dies at birth, and during this time, Anakin is found by the Darth Sidious still alive, comes back to Coruscant, and is built into the giant mechanical machine we know more better as Darth Vader. And of course, the ending shows both sides having different things. Luke and Leia are separated, given to Bail Organa, and Leia was given to Bail Organa on, I was about to say Mandalore, Alderaan, while Luke is given to Aunt Owen and Aunt Beru from Episode 2 and, of course, Episode 4. During And of course, when all this is going on, we also get a shot of the construction of the Death Star with Darth Vader and the Emperor looming over. So, what do I think of this movie? Like I said earlier, after all that plot, this movie goes back to basics. There's still some political talk in here, but very little in terms of the political talk, more so in terms of basic straight up storytelling, which is what Star Wars was always best at. This movie, like I said, is a great movie. There's so many great things about it. Get some of the easiest things out of the way. The fight scenes are excellent, especially the last two fight scenes between Yoda and Sidious and Anakin and Obi-Wan. Those fight scenes are great. The special effects, for the most part, are pretty good. I'll get to some of the little minor quibbles about this movie, but for the most part, the special effects are pretty good. The worlds look really good. The droids look very good. The action sequences are great. The space action sequence was great. Some of the sequences we got on Utapau and Kashyyyk are very well done. That scene and the Opera House scene when Palpatine first tells Anakin of Darth Plagueis and the little bit of mythos is probably one of the best scenes in all of Star Wars. Just the way that scene is done, the way it's crafted, dripping with atmosphere. It's well acted. It's well written. The little glowing thing I think looks pretty cool. Ian McDiarmid pretty much steals every single scene he's in, even against big name stars like Frank Oz and Samuel L. Jackson. Ian McDiarmid steals the friggin' show. Speaking of stealing a show, what about the acting? The acting is way better than it was in the first two prequel movies in episodes 1 and 2. Not only we get some of the ones that we already know were going to be good, Ewan McGregor, Natalie Portman, and Ian McDiarmid, but we also get but Hayden Christensen actually does a much better job here than in episode 2. Like I said, this guy actually can act, and like I said in my episode 2 review, he was told to hold back his acting ability on episode 2 to make his appearance in 3 more powerful. And to be fair, it does make it more powerful, but again, at the expense of the episode 2 acting, which is a blight on that movie. Not so much here. Yeah, you still get a couple moments of, subpar acting, but for the most part, Hayden Christensen does a pretty good job in this movie. Christopher Lee, for the one scene he's in, was pretty good. Matthew Wood was very intimidating as General Grievous, and speaking of, CG, General Grievous is probably the best example of how CG is used in this movie. It's, in terms of, single creatures / droids. Very well done. R2-D2, by the way, is also completely CG. In the first 2 movies, there were moments of him being in CG, but there were also moments of him just being a regular stand-in prop that happens to move. In this movie, they completely forego the prop and went straight for the CG aspect of the droid. Anthony Daniels as 3PO. Basically, and of course others. You got Peter Mayhew back as Chewbacca. Granted, it's a brief appearance, but still. Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa, I think, does a good job for the few scenes he's in. And you have just a bunch of... and of course you have... How could I forget? James Earl Jones. Now, I say that, but it has not been made official that James Earl Jones, in fact, did do the voice for Darth Vader in episode 3, in the one scene that the actual Darth Vader spoke in terms of, the mechanical voice. Now, I say that because James Earl Jones has come out, because it was an uncredited role, and James Earl Jones himself said that you'd have to ask George Lucas if that was indeed my voice or not. I personally believe that it was James Earl Jones. It has to be James Earl Jones. Just the way it's done, the way it was said, and James Earl Jones has only ever really done the movies. I'm not saying he's never done like TV or game appearances, but for the most part, it's been a movie thing. So and of course he came back for Rogue One. So I firmly believe that James Earl Jones came back for this role. So yes, the acting I think is pretty much on point. The special effects are great. The story, it's a well-written story. This is for the most part a well-written story and a well-written movie. It seems like George Lucas saved the best for last, and thankfully and thank goodness for it. He learned from the mistakes of Episode 1 and 2 and told a straight-up simple story in Episode 3. And there's a lot of really good here in this movie. Now let's get to the bad, and not so much bad as they are minor complaints. As I said earlier, the CG for most of the creatures is great. But there are a couple of instances where the CG doesn't exactly work. They're not nearly as bad as in Episode 1 and 2. Let me just get that right out. They're not nearly as bad as in the first two episodes. But in Episode 3, there are still a couple moments where CG isn't exactly great. Yoda definitely looks a lot better than he did in Episode 2, but there are still a few moments, and you can kind of see them. There are still a few moments here and there throughout the movie where Yoda looks a little bit too fake. During most of the scenes, he looks okay. Most of the scenes like Kashyyyk, the scenes when he's a hologram, pretty much most of the end of the movie, especially when he's fighting Sidious, Yoda's pretty good. But there are other cherry pick other scenes. There are certain moments where Yoda still looks just a little bit too fake. As for CG on the creatures, I guess if there was one other creature that looked a little bit too fake for my liking, it was the giant Boga scene. If you're wondering what the hell a Boga is, it's that one creature Obi-Wan rides on Utapau. That thing, again, much like Yoda, at times it looks good, and at times it doesn't. So, a couple of those moments aside, what are some other moments that are minor complaints? Well, like I did say, most of the acting was on point, and most of the movie was well written. There are a couple of moments that are not that great. For example, there are a couple lines that are, of course, cringe-worthy. Of course, the scene we know of with the second scene with Anakin and Padme, when she says, "Oh, love has blinded you." Yes, that scene, while it didn't bother me, I have to objectively say that is not a good executed scene, and it does leave a mark. So yeah, it can be cringeworthy. There's like, say, for example, there's a line later when Mace Windu has to say something, saying the oppression of the Sith will never return, and I'm like, okay, I understand why they had Samuel L. Jackson be kind of calm and collected. He is a Jedi, after all, he's got to be. But yeah, Samuel L. Jackson has always been more suited to kind of yelling out and being more independent and saying whatever's on his mind. So yeah, that one line, it really wasn't any of the lines in the movie. That one line in the movie, the oppression of the Sith will never return, you have lost, that was a line that I will admit was a little bit unnatural for Samuel L. Jackson to say, and you can kind of hear it in his voice. Of course, the explanation for why Padme dies, saying that she's lost the will to live. To be fair, the robot thing does say that we have no idea why the hell she's dying. All we know is that she's dying. That's all we know is that she's lost the will to live. We don't know why she's dying. Medically, she should be okay. So, yeah, that scene, that was not explained the best. I mean, you could have just said, well, she was force-choked, and she's having childbirth. That's it. There are women who do die at childbirth for other extraneous circumstances. Why they didn't go with that, I don't know. But, yeah, so like I said, a couple scenes here and there that might not be executed the best, or a couple lines here and there that might not be the greatest, but still, this is a great movie. It has attention to detail, like Obi-Wan's Jedi garb being more burnt, and blackened dirt throughout his fight on Mustafar and through the rest of the end of the movie. When Obi-Wan escapes Utapau, we still see General Grievous's body next to his ship. You could have easily have gotten rid of it and be like, oh, well, the clones cleaned it up. Nope, they kept the body there, which I think was a good attention to detail. Just, all the little things, the facial features that Hayden Christensen makes whenever he's not speaking are fucking intimidating. Especially with his yellow eyes. The music, how can I forget the music? John Williams does a fantastic job. He's done a fantastic job throughout every single Star Wars movie he's ever been a part of. John Williams has always been one of the best parts of these movies, and the music here, oh, it's just beautiful. So, I don't know what else to say. I've praised pretty much everything I need to be praised. The cinematography is very good. Yeah, granted, there are a couple instances where the camera is a little bit off, like when Mace Windu's fighting Sidious, and the camera is a bit too close to Windu's and Sidious's faces. And there was a moment which is hilarious how they didn't see this, when you see the up close eyes on Grievous and Obi-Wan, and in the scene it works in context. But with Obi-Wan, the camera's like a little bit like this, so it's not like this, it's like this. So it looks kind of weird with this extra space on Obi-Wan. It's weird. But still, there are a lot of great things in this movie. I can't recommend this movie enough. George Lucas has himself said that if you want to watch the true trilogy of movies, watch it in the order that it happened. But me, personally, I would recommend you watch it in the order they were made. Granted, yes, Episode 6 is the last movie thematically in terms of the two trilogies, but this movie is the one that really has a note of finality. Just the way it's set up and the way it's done. This movie has a note of finality that, as good as Return of the Jedi was, it just didn't have. And to be fair, I did enjoy this movie more than Return of the Jedi. I'm going to give this movie a 9 out of 10. This is a well-worthy entry into the series, a great movie, in fact, and it has a lot of things going for it. I think some of the hate it might get from people like, say, Doug and Rob Walker is way overblown. This movie is one of the best. In fact, it ranks up there with Episode 4. And, of course, I mentioned, like, the couple of lines and acting moments that don't work. To be fair, Episode 4 had that, too. Episode 4 had those problems, too. So, I'm not gonna give that movie a pass and mark this movie when that movie had it, too. So, with that said, the movie gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I'll see you next week, guys, when I review Star Wars: The Clone Wars, the only fully rendered CG animated movie of the Clone Wars saga. Until next time, guys, peace.